Notebook on Cities and Culture's Korea tour is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, David Hayes, and Polar Inertia Journal, an outlet for artists and researchers documenting the urban condition at polarinertia.com. I've seen you say somewhere before that if Paris was a literary character, it would be a recurring hero, which would make Seoul what kind of character?
It's more an elusive character. It's not in a novel, but rather in short stories. So you would rather not catch it in one story, but just get different glimpses from different angles. It's a shapeshifter of a city.
What kind of character do you think of then? Is there a character in literary history that's ever struck you as like Seoul?
Never actually thought about it. It's a very good question. I don't know. Maybe someone with disguise or not deceive with a bad intention, but just enjoy just running away from death or from not from itself, but just I don't know, enjoying life fully, but at the same time it's a rush. It's a character which can be still at times, but with different faces.
And it's in that very city, Seoul, Korea. I'm sitting down today on Notebook on Cities and Culture, speaking with Stephane Mot. He is the writer behind the blog Seoul Village, which you've probably seen if you've read about Seoul at all. Certainly I've read a lot of it, getting my mind into Seoul in advance. He's also a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and as he says, nonsense. But he's also something he calls a conceptor. What is that?
It doesn't mean that I make sense or I relevant ideas. It's just the way I breathe, the way I see things, or I just absorb information. I don't do research. Some things I write may look like research, but it's just I'm absorbing like a sponge, and it comes out. I define
life as a research.
Yeah, it's just also writing as an embarrassing bodily function. So yes. I absorb so much information that it has to come out. So one way or another. So it's not gracious most of the time, but it's also a matter of survival. It's just to let it out and to make room in the attic.
What are some of the tasks you perform as a conceptor specifically?
Well, typically in the past, it would be, it would range, particularly in the startup years, it would range from creating new applications or designing new strategies.
This is in the very early 90s, the beginning of tech startup culture, right?
Right. Actually, I was... when I came back from Korea, which was my first true job experience, I thought I would do what I always thought I was made for, which was joining a press group and maybe writing, basically. And then there was in the alumni, through the alumni, there was this project of online gaming, which sounded quite fun to me. So I'm quite
exotic in those days.
I think games are really important, and fun is essential to me. It's an essential driver to me. So here, the online dimensions was something I never really search necessarily, but it sounded stimulating, and it was a very dense experience. And I survived 3 startups in 3 years. So and
3 stressful years, I would imagine.
A lot of stress, but a lot of fun too, and a lot of really it was so helpful for what happened next. So I learned a lot from many mistakes, and also I know it's a human experience also, because everything is shorter, more extreme ways, and
it's a more compressed human experience.
It's a very intense human experience, and then I would join a bigger startup where we would grow from 5 to a few thousands in a few years. So it's very interesting experience too, because you grow, you develop synapses all the time, and with people from all walks of life, and it's a very rich experience. So after that, it's very difficult to go to something more normal.
Yes. Normality is done at that point.
Well, normality doesn't exist anyway, so it's just I like the conceptual part. I like the when it's at the start, or when we have to understand what's going on or what will happen. So that's why I was also into strategic intelligence, or trying to guess what competitors or co-competitors or would do, or how the world will evolve in the years or decades to come. So that was really stimulating. And again, in the 90s, there was a disruptive moment because of technological changes. So it was very stimulating moment. So, and once the markets become mature, then there's no fun in it. So
yes.
It's just
fun is over at that point. You move on to the next concept.
So it's just always. I'm very often got contacted by people thinking on different issues, because I write about innovation, I write about urbanism, I write about politics. So I'm connected for different issues, and I like to. I like this ping pong to work on concepts, or on ways to apprehend new situations, or
to connect to these different areas.
Yes, I don't like to be in a category. I don't want to be. Eventually, I would be put in a box, but that would be 6 feet under. So I'm not in a hurry for that.
That's the only box you're going to be put in. Now, you came to Seoul first in 1991. Why did you come then?
I joined the French embassy, so it was the economic section, and I previously had I majored business, and I chose precisely economy because it was. I didn't sacrifice any dimension. I was interested in math, I was interested in literature, I was interested in science, I was interested in history, geography, and that in economy you're studying the impact of activity, of human activity or animal activity. So
it touches everything.
It touches everything. You have to you just pick up from any angle, and that's what I really enjoyed. So, and I had the first experience an internship in Indonesia, and I wanted to come back to Asia, but in a different context, something really more maybe intense professionally. And there was this opportunity in Korea, and it was a moment. So 91. So it was after the Olympic Games, and there was a new deal because the country opened up with the democratic change, and also the World Cup. So the Olympics. So then there was.
Everybody has World Cup on the brain, of course, these days.
Well, my brain is a bit fried because I slept like 4 hours last night because of the World Game precisely. So, yes. But yeah. It was a moment when the cards had to be redealt because the castings, the partnerships were not well done, because it was mostly with Chaebol, which are the big group, which was the only one with international structures.
Samsung, Hyundai, so on.
Yeah, this kind of players. And then the small and medium enterprise ecosystem was growing, and there were more affinities. So it was interesting to source on both sides and to find to open new market also. So it was an interesting moment.
What was Korea like at that time, and Seoul especially in 1991? How was it different than today?
It was at the same time a more beautiful and a much harder city, and well, it was very stressful. People were very stressed. There was a lot of tension on the street. People were very competitive, and everything was about success. The miracle on the Han River, everybody was very competitive, washing their cars every day, dressing up totally, and just judging each other, competing with each other on all fronts. And then came the IMF crisis, and then it was okay to fail, and then to take time with families and friends. So, and the infrastructure, the leisure infrastructure was developed, and the city became so softened to be much more welcoming. So they would also present much more the cultural assets. First contact with Seoul was very gloomy. I came in the winter, and arriving in the winter, it was very gray, and that's not Seoul in winter. It's usually very sunny, and that's why I prefer Seoul in winter in Seoul than in Paris, because Paris is quite gray in winter, and here it can be very cold, but at least you can feel the season. And it was gray, and there was all these apartment blocks, and the only trace with some kind of identity I could see then was the Namdaemun Gate on the way, because I went straight to the office downtown. And now I think the different urban and architectural heritage are much more valued. At the same time, the city is much more sanitized, story told, and edited. So many neighborhoods disappeared. That's the biggest loss, of course.
But during that first time in 1991 that you came here, did you already realize that you would have a future in Seoul as well, that you would be back later, that your life would be involved with Seoul somehow?
It's a little bit like New York City. If you've lived some time in New York, you become a New Yorker, or Paris the same. And here, I felt something very strong and intimate with Seoul.
Immediately?
It was very striking. I love to walk in cities. And it was so frustrating because downtown Paris, it was a city where cars ruled, and pedestrians was basically parasites. So if you wanted to cross a big major street, you had to go either on the ground or overpasses. So it was very, very frustrating. And now, typically, they open up the Gwanghwamun Square. So even if it's not perfect architecturally, at least you can see pedestrians swarming around and just reaching at each place, which would require cabs before. So it's completely different experience. But then I had the chance to have the time to take the time to go to different neighborhoods also, and to see the different villages of Seoul precisely. And still now there are different villages in Seoul, different time capsules, or it can be because of a hill, or because of a streamlet, or because of it's just off the main streets. But still, you have different paces, different cities within the cities.
What were some of the first villages in Seoul that made you realize this was an interesting place? Which were some of the early places you walked into that made you think you wanted to learn more about Seoul?
I very quickly had to go to for the job to go to the different industrial areas, and Mapogu was not a very nice district back then.
I was there yesterday, and it was really nice. I was biking around the river, but you wouldn't do that then.
Ride a bicycle 10 years ago, you would tell me that, say I'm not suicidal. But now I love to ride bicycles in Seoul. And Mapogu, definitely, the landfill was still there, so it was really stinking neighborhood also. And there were all these small industrial landscape, but it's not factories, but really small buildings, 2-3-story buildings, tiled ones. Not very nice, but it has an interesting beauty to it, and a very strange atmosphere. I felt that atmosphere also in some suburbs of Paris, which were also completely erased to make room for La Défense, behind La Défense, actually.
Tell me, you're a ninth generation Parisian, correct? So what kind of relationship with Paris does that give you, going back so long, in terms of your family and in terms of your own life with Paris?
Paris is part of me. It's like I need it, like I need Seoul. So, and I need to have one foot on each city.
How often are you going back and forth?
I go a couple of times every year to Paris, but at one stage we decided Seoul was where we felt more stimulated more enjoying life. And now when I come back to Paris, it's as a Parisian, but also as an outsider at time, and I rediscover neighborhoods that I like, and it's interesting too.
What has it made you realize about Paris, being an outsider and being there, gaining an outsider status, seeing from the perspective of a half outsider, shall we say? What have you realized about Paris that you might not have known if you were there your whole life?
I don't know. I felt more affection for certain neighborhoods which I already liked. But since I decided to stay there to try it, to give it a shot, because I always live in the same neighborhood, so it was the opportunity to rediscover the city. So I grew, maybe my love grew stronger for the city, different. So.
Now, when did you first begin writing about Seoul? When was the earliest writing you did about this city?
About a couple of months into my first stay, I wrote a short story about. It was more about Korea then, and Seoul became just an evidence. I mean, it's just there was a. I've always written stories and fictions, but Seoul had maybe dig much deeper. I guess I could go much more intimate with the city than with Paris.
Why? Why was it more? Why did you have a more intimate relationship with a city you were new to than a city that you went back 9 generations with?
I don't know. It's a relationship to death, which is very important to me. And there are 2 main topics to write about. It's love and death.
Yes.
And because I'm superstitious and very much in love, I stick to death. So.
Sure.
And so
you have a book of stories about. Is it about Korea or Seoul specifically? It's French language only, but you do have a book of stories available.
Yeah, it's a collection of stories, and it's also they're just 4 stories about Seoul. I completed a collection in English too, and not published yet.
And when will it come out? Do you know?
Very good question.
One day.
Someday, yeah. But anyway, the important for me is not to publish, but to get it out of myself. So I
simply write.
To simply get rid of things that are haunting me. I'm haunting Seoul the way Seoul is haunting me. So I never been obsessed with publishing, but I realized that publishing was important to put these ghosts behind me, to free myself from them, not to, okay, there's always a new version coming or this. No, it's just to put it in the past and get a different relationship and then move to other ghosts.
Right. You get to move to other ghosts, but then is it at all important to you that the writing you have published starts conversations with other people, that it becomes accessible to other people and you can then talk about Seoul with them? Or does it not matter? Does it not matter that others read what you've published?
Again, I read not much fiction, but a lot of junk, and it's when some people contact me, I never know how they came from, which angle they came from. Some know me because of the things I wrote about soccer, others about innovation, others about... So it's very, very... I don't know on which foot to dance, and I don't dance.
Right, fair enough. But how are the many ways people find you? Is it usually about something related to Korea? Is it how many ways are there? Is it just everybody has a different path to your work?
No, actually, when I first used the web in the early 90s, or I think, yeah. It was a revelation to me. It was just an extension of myself. It's so natural. And when I left the corporate world, I decided, okay, I can just lay it out, all out online. I used my own name, not a pseudonym. I knew I would just embarrass myself with unpolished, ill-written stuff. So it's very, very embarrassing when I move back to things. There are pieces or posts I cannot even understand what I wrote. So
writings from 20 years ago, or just that long ago?
No, it can be from 10 to now. So, but it was almost a Borgesian experience. So it's just a series of, not mirrors, not narcissistic, or maybe it is, but it's not the aim of the game. It's just, I realize that because I produce a lot of junk online, I can build the synapses much more intuitively. To me, discovering hypertext or wikis or now the hashtags, just connections, synapses. I don't have a specific portal. I have different blogs. It's some kind of a cloud. It's shapeless and it doesn't have any center nor purpose. But to me, because I often write about the same issues, and sometimes I'm repeating myself. So it's also a way of fishing, because I try to put stuff on computers, but I cannot search, or I cannot. It's just an extension.
It's an extension. And in this,
so I don't go very intimate online. That's why that I reserve to fiction.
And in this cloud of material of yours, you say you come back to the same subjects over and over again. What are your favorite subjects to return to, or what are the subjects you return most often to?
I don't have vertical, but somehow there are some majors. So there's urbanism, there is culture, there is politics too.
Yeah. And not just Korean politics. You've written about Japanese politics as well, correct?
Or French or American politics. Because I'm just human, so I'm I'm a social, political, economic animal.
Fair enough.
And it's about fiction too. So I often blur the lines between fiction and reality. So my blogs are rather weapons of mass disinformation. I don't want to be considered as a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a scholar. I'm not doing research, even if it may sometimes look like it.
But you can define yourself by the things that you are not.
Again, it just comes out.
And it comes out in multiple languages. You, of course, write in French, but also English. Why do you also write in English?
I guess it's because, I've over the years, both personally and professionally, I developed the language, and also I was interested in trying. Also there are certain topics. Typically, if you're talking about American politics, or if you're at that time also depending on the periods, at one stage the blogs were important, but before the blogs, the fora, online fora was the main platform. So you have to write in English too. And later on, I wanted to try how far can I go in fiction to in English, and it took me a lot of time to reach a different nature in French too, because I always wrote, but it's only maybe more than a decade ago that I could do really much more intimate things in French, and I wanted to know, can I do this kind of stuff in English too? And that's another reason why I joined the Seoul Writers Workshop, which is a group of nice people who just enjoy writing, and it's
in English.
It's in English, yes. So it's something which I really appreciate, because in France, writing is a very solitary thing. We don't learn creative writing. There's no pedagogy of it. It's just something very personal. So for poetry, there are circles or platforms, informal platforms, but for fiction, it's much more rare. And in English, there's its tradition. Everywhere expats go, there are writing communities. And I like the idea of sharing, of people who write different on different issues and really completely different styles. But it's a very interesting moment, because you share with people who have similar paths, and there's also a mirror effect about what you write because you review other people's work, and something which can be quite intimate at times, and you learn a lot about writing. So.
Do you find the expats you meet, the writing expats you meet, are also taking Seoul as a subject in the way you have?
Differently. Many write about the experience of expats in Korea and in Seoul. When I write in my fiction, the main character is actually Seoul, but most of my characters are Korean. They are Soulites.
Do you find you must think like a Korean to write a Korean character? And what does that mean to you, to think like a Korean?
It's not about thinking like a Korean. It's just experiencing life, death, and life in the city in a way where there is a level of intimacy with the city.
It's about location, not nationality. It's about space, not
about nationality. There are cultural dimensions, of course, elements of life, but it's really ultimately, cities. I define cities as the scars humans draw on their faces or on the surface of Earth to tell that they once roamed it. So it's about, I write about death. So my characters are often lonely, or it says it can be very dark at times. But I'm an optimist.
People do talk about cities often as if they produce loneliness, or that their cities are hosts to loneliness. Do you think that Paris and Seoul have the same kind of loneliness? Do you think the same people endure the same kind of loneliness in those two cities?
There are different kind of tragedies, but similar ones, and different kind of tragedies. And there is the fact that the city itself is a shapeshifter, and that it's changing. So since I'm very much into what's considered as absurdist fiction, Seoul is much more inspiring to me.
It's a more absurd place?
I feel more stimulated by it, and it's more my tempo, I guess.
When you walk around Seoul today, what do you see changing in this moment?
The people, because it's all about the people, and of course the neighborhoods, these vanishing alleyways. But what I see changing was, I think, at the same time, some distressing news about the social fabric, and on the other hand, a different relationship to the city, because at one stage every neighborhood was doomed for redevelopment, and everybody was somehow grieving or already switching to something else, or already gone. So nobody was in the present. And this is a bit changing. People are much more, maybe a little bit more, caring for the present. So, but yeah, that's one of the changes, I guess.
You mentioned the stories about what's happening to the social fabric here. What is happening to it? What do you hear is happening to the Korean social fabric?
I guess there's a global phenomenon. Typically, it's the middle class, which is struggling everywhere. And here, typically, since it was the driver of society, so there's always been the very poor, the very rich. But in between, the middle class was growing, always improving, and that's changed. So and the safety net is still not very good. But yeah, that's the social fabric is also the fact that Seoul was built after the wars, or after the occupation and the war, and that a generation that built it is about to disappear, and typically the grandmothers who somehow maintain the village structure, they will soon vanish. And what will happen next? Typically, even in the apartment complexes, they were the ones who maintained the connections, and this it's changing because the architecture of the apartment blocks is changing too. In the previous generation, there were these outdoor corridors which somehow mirrored the streets. So you knew your neighbors. You could tell, okay, there's a bicycle, there's a kid, there's a kimchi jar, or there's a small trapdoor for the Yakuta Juma, so that she can drop the. Or you could hear the TV or people opening their doors to ventilate. Now every household has an air con and a vault of a door, and it's vertical, much more vertical, with elevators and just two doors. And when people move to new neighborhoods, the tradition was to also talk around, so rice cake. And that's changed. It was possible in the old structure, but not anymore. So
no more talk door to door today.
No. It's really different. It's much more each one, and much the cell unit is shrinking.
It's a change that people talk about already having taken place in America long ago. Has it taken place in Paris as well?
In Paris, because first the cityscape doesn't evolve as quickly, it's much easier to revive neighborhoods and village spirit, the bourgeois bohème spirit. It's growing here too. There are many bobo neighborhoods in Seoul too, but it's much more difficult to revive neighborhoods when you have these big structures. If you see places like Tamsil, where it's a little bit like the Mojave Desert, it's very barren and flat, and then you have these big totem cactuses here and there, buildings, and on the other hand you have all these very dense neighborhoods, what they call the villas, with 3-4 story buildings, very compact and no air breathing, and it's more like Sahel desert, so no life there either.
Why do you think it's important for a city to retain that village spirit?
I think the human scale, even if it's not the neighborhood scale, it's every city dies when the last neighborhood dies. Or else it's Brasilia or Pyongyang. It's completely edited, completely. Or
it becomes a kind of nowhere. Yeah, Songdo. I'll be going there at some point. But have you been over to Songdo? Have you seen what that's like?
Oh yeah, I've been following from the very early stages, and it's a very stimulating and very exciting project.
For those who don't know, what is it?
It's typically one of these greenfield new towns. The thing is, because of the land value, it's much cheaper to build a new town from scratch outside of the city instead of renovating existing neighborhoods. That's why in Incheon you have central neighborhoods which are completely derelict and these brand new districts. And Songdo is a business district, so it's not a new town like most new towns in Korea. It's something which is a private project and international reach, and it's really very large scale. It's a polder, so it's partly gained on the sea, and it's just very, very impressive project. But then from an urbanism point of view, it's more like Brasilia than a 21st century city.
Is it comparable at all to the part of Paris you mentioned, La Défense?
La Défense was really a 100% business district, so it was really a tiny Manhattan or a downtown LA maybe. But here there's the ambition to make a whole new city, but then the timing, the way it's sequenced is not right. Typically there's no subway from day one, and there are lots which are allocated, but the very fabric of the city is not ready yet. The articulation is not ready yet. So it's okay now, and it's improving. It's changing very quickly. But it would have been much better if it had been more, better sequenced.
And certainly, if it had more organically developed.
It's important to leave a part of chaos or a part of not improvisation, but a place where which is not where there's no place for storytelling. It's essential that the cities are not overly scripted. So there was this interesting. If you read the map, there was this only curved part or tiny street which was meant for business, but where it was called Canal Walk. And to me, it should have been central. That it was not only parts. One side was developed from day one, and it should have been from both sides. But it was. I love to read maps actually, and I have very collections of maps of Seoul. And what I often did was to look at the map and to look for crooked streets, and there are not crooked streets in Songdo.
Yes,
or alleyways.
No way.
Alleyways are also essential. That's where that's the true extensions of the city. That's where it's like a blood system without capillaries.
It is something I notice in Asia, in the big cities here or in Japan, that you can walk down the main streets, the high streets, and they'll often not be that interesting, and at night they close down. But you turn into an alley and suddenly everything is there. It's all lit up. Is that normally how it is in Seoul? You go off the high streets and then you find the life?
It depends. Typically, the most traditional alleyways traditionally were very dark at night. If you go to Samsung 20 years ago, it was just a couple of restaurants and it was very, very dark. Now it's just bright with shops and restaurants. It's a different neighborhood altogether. Not much fewer people live there, so it's much more touristic. It can be also in between some mid-sized streets which are curved but lined with trees, where it's really different atmosphere. People can walk on the streets, which is less inviting in bigger streets.
This is a good example. Now that you mention this, the neighborhood we're in, Sinchon. From what I hear, there used to be cars going all through here all day long, but now many of the areas are blocked off to cars. People can walk around. That seems like it's a type of. Would you call that a type of positive change in Seoul?
It sure is good to have more pedestrian places. This is a very hectic place because of the different universities, and definitely it's much better now than it was.
Do you remember how this was in 1991?
Yes, there were more. It was a little bit low at that moment because each neighborhood has ups and downs, and Sinchon used to be much more popular than Taeyangno. Then part of the clubs and theaters moved to Taeyangno or to Hongdae, and now they are moving from Hongdae to Haemangchon or other neighborhoods because of the land value.
They keep moving.
They keep moving. So, and neighborhoods need to breathe and evolve. That's essential. It's not. So that's a beauty of the city too. Sometimes it's too radical, or as soon as there was this rejection of old neighborhoods, and now there's the other extreme where they are just invaded by speculators.
I see. Now, in Paris, as we mentioned, the built environment can't really change in the central city. So when change happens in Paris, how does it happen, considering that the buildings stay the same?
Land value is a key issue. It's about speculation. It's all the same, or the proportion of tourists and locals. The same, different kind of stories in Venice. Some parts become really museum cities. Others, and then there is the creative or the artistic communities which tend to flourish in places which they can afford. So they're shifting from places to places, and that's another reason why. And then the musical community follows, and that's a whole. And then the entertainment follows and then business follows. So it changes very quickly. And there's all these Dadongné, moon villages up the hills, which are now taken over. What's the good thing is that they're not destroyed, but then it's difficult to follow. So.
We talked about your usage of French and English, but what has been your relationship with the Korean language?
That's my biggest shame, I'm afraid. When I came in 91, I learned Hangul in just a couple of hours or so.
Yes.
And the expressions, just basic survival expressions, very, very quickly. And all the jowls was dropping around, so it was fantastic. And now it doesn't. It's not enough, of course.
Right.
And now many Westerners arrive in Seoul speaking pretty decent Korean. So I have no excuse whatsoever. So now it's. I always had an alibi, like being between planes, or
Yes.
never having 3 months to submerge into it.
Right.
And now that I don't have this alibi, it's just blatant that I'm purely lazy, that's all. And also, I love to learn foreign languages, but Korean is very, very frustrating to me. There is explanation. It's also due to the pedagogy, which is not very friendly, and it's also due to the fact that only recently the masses rush to learn Korean language. So the pedagogic tools will evolve very quickly. So I'm not worried about that. But the bulk of it is, first, my laziness, and second, the fact that it's a very, very, very demanding language.
It is.
And it's very linear. In other languages, it's like going up a staircase. You jump one stage, you feel much more comfortable. You can open the door very easily. Here, if you learn 10 years, you speak like an 11-year-old Korean. And even among Koreans, people judge themselves through the level of language. And they're used to seeing foreigners who either speak the language or don't, but not in between, somewhere in between. So they always switch to another one. And so I can only speak like a toddler, so it's very embarrassing.
Right.
And yeah, and I know people who've been here for decades and who cannot have a real conversation even if
Right. Yes, you do notice that. It's interesting because I meet Westerners here who are either they're beginners or advanced at Korean, even ones who are we would consider fluent in Korean. They still think they still think they're up against a wall they have to get over. No matter how advanced, there's something about the Korean language where people always think they're not good enough. Does it seem that way?
There's this, but I'm very good at Korean silence. I walked across all Seoul neighborhoods, every single dong of every single gu, and I love to stop and feel this silence. And
is it a different silence than other silences?
Yes, there's an infinity of it, and to see how people live, how people breathe, interact, and experience their city, and it's this relationship to time and again death. It's something which I completely feel this I think I absorb much easier than the language. So the language I piled up a lot of vocabulary over the years, but my grammar is terrible. So.
This relationship to death that Koreans have, is it different than the relationship French seem to have to death?
I don't know, it's the same as all humans, but because of the culture and history and the city also, it highlights it maybe. So it makes it even more touching here.
In what ways do you notice it?
Again, it's in the silence, also in the streets, these alleyways, and these neighborhoods where people leave or transit just because they're already thinking about the next destination or grieving for what's going to disappear.
For what they think is about to disappear.
Yes, so
is about to disappear in Seoul? What do you?
If you discuss it with every Seoulite, has memories of places that don't exist anymore.
I see.
Even their schools or of course, their homes most of the time. But even the streets, when you have a new town, everything is erased. You don't even keep the map. It's a negation of the city. It's not. It's the very expression of new town that tells it all. It's not. You're not improving the city. You're negating it.
It's, as you say, you look at these maps, and in the collection of maps you have, which are the maps of Seoul that are the most interesting, that tell you the most? What kind of map of Seoul is the richest map of Seoul for you?
I like to match old maps, satellite maps, more recent ones, and also the ones which are drawn by people, how they represent their neighborhoods, be it shops or restaurants or local administration authorities, how they want to highlight part of the cities, or when they make simplified maps, which parts they blur or highlight, and the editorial line somehow is interesting.
The subjectivity of the map.
Yes, the subjectivity. All points of view are subjective, but again, what's nice is to compare different ones and to see the gaps and the missing parts. And actually, what I write about is about these gaps, or the missing parts, or the ones I invent, or because again, I don't keep memories of all the neighborhoods I've been to, but the Seoul I have in my mind is more than half fictional. It's a beam of different. It's a mix of different neighborhoods. It's this place here, but actually it's a mix of different places and different periods in time.
Does then everybody in Seoul have their own distinctive soul in their mind? Because as you say, no matter what their age, a Seoulite has memories of places that are gone. They mix with places that are here. Does everybody wind up with a kind of fictional soul?
I guess so, or else everybody would get crazy, I guess.
Yes, right. So, you can't keep up with the present soul at all times.
No, and also there's this, it's beyond Seoul, it's really about the way Korea changed over the past decades, but the generation gaps were not between parents and grandparents and kids, but between brothers and sisters, or if you have 2 years different, you don't experience at all the same place, the same world. It's you live in different world. So that's the case now, because the clock has somehow the Mad Hatter and the White Rabbit have somehow gone a bit older and grown older, a bit changed their pace, but. Basically, it was very much more spectacular during the 90s. It's different generational gaps within generations.
Right. That's what people often write about here, is how different the older and younger people are in Korea. When you interact with them, do you find that's true?
Yes, of course there are. And it's also the mindsets, of course, because some people are more conservative, others are. Because I move in very often in artistic or innovative circles, so and there again you have people from different generations. So at the same time they share a lot more between generations, but still you have differences of different habits, different ways of living and operating time. So it's. But now I guess the sense of belonging has changed also. Much more Soulites feel that they are Soulites also, because people move from different regions, and this sense of origin is changing, because 20 years ago people would ask which region you were from, and now it's less an issue.
More people are from Seoul. They've been here a long time.
From Seoul, and also the experience is is not that different now, as different as it used to be.
It's not as easy to find.
Yeah, the Seoulite identity has grown also, and also because this generation of grandparents is disappearing, is this sense of belonging is changing too.
We've talked a bit about your title as a conceptor and your interests in concepts when they began. When you got here to Seoul first, was it as if the concept of Seoul had just appeared and it was in its early stages?
No, it's just, again, I wanted to come back to Asia, but to a different, to have a different experience, so I didn't know what to expect. I was really open, I was welcoming what could happen. So there was more distance also. It was less open society than others, but much more rewarding in the long term because the relationships were much more sincere and much stronger, and the emotions more intense. I think to me the adjective that defines Korea is intense.
What do you think has changed now that Korea has opened up to the world? Now that the world is more aware of Korea? Now that it's a cultural force internationally. Everybody knows about something from Korea in the world. How does that make the experience of Korea different?
I think there is a bias also because part of the image projected is part of an industry also, and I'm afraid about cultural diversity.
You think that might diminish?
Yes, because it's too much. There's too much schizophrenia between the Hallyu, the Korean wave, and the tradition, and it's either one or the other. And there are few people really bridging, or there's too much pushing from authorities on the business side, or on the quote unquote traditional unquote side. So it's a bit extreme, and but hopefully I meet more and more people who are aware of the dangers and who are heralding cultural diversity, and aware that they should respect all the dimensions of the Korean culture, and also embrace other cultures, but a more reasonable way. So because it's not all or nothing, but much more balanced.
Given that you're interested mainly in concepts that are new, things that are yet unformed, would you say that Seoul somehow stays new and stays unformed, and that's why it's kept you interested?
It's because it remains a shapeshifter that it's still mesmerizing. So the more neighborhoods turn into sanitized and dead blocks, it's like it's crippling the city, but it's just part of the city, so it doesn't. The soul is not dead. The soul is not dead, so it's still alive and kicking and keeping me awake.
And do you think these sanitized neighborhoods can go back to being unsanitized? Can they return to the state from whence they came?
That's very difficult at the same time from a cityscape or architectural point of view, because it's very exclusive. There are too many exclusive structures and metastructures. So it's but there are reasons to hope, because it's all about the people again. So people are much more conscious of what's happening to the city and to them, and they feel much more affection for their city, and they care about the city they will live in. So it's changing. We're in the transition. Typically, the fact that only recently, just a couple of years ago, more people dreamt about living in private homes instead of apartments for the first time since the 70s. So it's a major change.
What does that change mean?
It means that the death, which the lemming race it might be over.
Oh, right.
And anyway, the apartment model is the apartment, not the apartment, but the appartement, Korean style model is reaching its limit. So
What was the matter with that model? What were the faults of this model?
it was just it came out. It started with the necessity. It was just because of the exodus or the construction and the baby boom, and so there was a need for dense habitations. But then it became just industrialized, and apartments were basically consumer goods. You would purchase one, sell it in 3 years later, and so on, and they were marketed like consumer goods. And people don't care what they build. They don't care about the future. They don't care. So this is not sustainable, and people are realizing that this is not the future. Seoul has no future if it continues like this.
When you're wandering around Seoul, when you're walking, what's something that you see that makes you believe that people do care again?
Small signs of the fact that there's more urban continuity too, and the fact that precisely at the neighborhood level, people are taking initiatives, or painting, or arranging places, or customizing, adding planes here and there, and
Making it their own.
They're making it their home. It's not just the apartment cell, but really they feel belonging at the same time to the city and to the neighborhood levels much more than they used to. They understand that it's a necessity to live. The city has no future if it's not included there.
I've been speaking here in Sinchon with Stephane Mot. He is an author, a conceptor, the author of the blog Seoul Village, and much more. Stephane, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Colin.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to all the backers of Notebook on Cities and Culture's Korea tour on Kickstarter. Adam Hartzell, Aidan Nullman, Alfred Lee, Andy Cooney, Angus Gordon, Bala Chenupati, Cam Smith, Chin Music Press, Dan Caraselli, Danny, Deborah Smith, Emmett Farragher, Umberto Grant, Ian Plosker, Ismail Kennedy, Jackie Gast, Jay Chang, Jeffrey Davis, James DeVito, Jonathan Filbert, Josh Paget, Kimberly Hahn, Manvir, Mark Hines, Matthew Workman, Maureen Kincaid-Speller, Monica Eck, Michael Fransky, MJ Pritchett, Patrick O'Flaherty, Patrick Park, Piers Rippey, Robert Salzberg, Samuel Hansen, Sean Brown, Themistocles Crucis, Thomas Unterberger, Timothy Dobbs, and Wayne Wright.